And to introduce myself, Andy Hill from Tesco. One of the nice things about working for Tesco is you seldom have to introduce what company you work for. The flip side of that, of course, is everyone knows what you do and comes up and talks to you afterwards and says, do you know, at my local store there's a trolley, third one from the left, slightly wonky wheel, or your favourite kind of pickled gherkin isn't in stock. Do feel free to come and talk to me about those later, but I can't promise to fix all those problems by Monday morning, but I shall do my best. I'm going to talk a little bit about why Tesco has a climate change strategy, what it is, and then zoom in on consumer barriers. And it's been really encouraging for me as we've gone through the day to see how many points of consistency there are between what we've heard, particularly from the consumer-facing organisations, small or large, and what Tesco is doing and what we're talking about. So to start off with, why does Tesco have a climate change strategy? Why is it important for Tesco to act? I guess, statistically speaking, a third of you or so may be Tesco shoppers. Perhaps even some of you will be shareholders. Why does the place where you might want to go and buy your baked beans a couple of times a week want to get involved in this area? And a number of reasons. Firstly, it saves us energy and money, and it's the responsible thing for us to do as a business. It increases our security of energy supply, and we've heard a lot about that today. Enables us to shape regulation and to engage with government on this. And really importantly, meets the growing demands and expectations of our customers, and I'll come on and talk about that a little bit more. And Tesco said that climate change and energy is an area we will take a leadership position on, and we want to be leaders in this transition to a low-carbon economy. And our strategy falls into three parts, and I think that slide there shows it very graphically for me. We started, as many businesses did, by measuring our own direct carbon footprint. And it's an exercise whereby you go and you look at all your shops and all your lorries, in our case, and our distribution centres and business travel, and you draw a circle around it and you say, what is our carbon footprint as a business? And the number in the UK there is 2.6 million tonnes of CO2, which is a large amount. And we look at how we can tackle that. And there's a real business benefit in tackling that for any business, because you spend money on energy, and the less energy you use, the less money you spend on it. And in our case, we can use that to reduce prices, and more people shop with us, and it feeds into our business model. But actually, as we started to look into this more, it's increasingly difficult to draw those lines around what is our direct carbon footprint. Because particularly a business like Tesco in countries all over the world, with suppliers from almost every country in the world, has this huge supply chain. And we go out and we try to measure our supply chain, and it comes out at the figure you've got on the slide there, 26 million tonnes of CO2, 10 times as much as Tesco's direct emissions in the UK. And then, when you look at our customers, and again, just in the UK, 228 million tonnes of CO2. That's Tesco customers and the energy that they're using in their lives. So Tesco's direct footprint, 10 times bigger when you look at the supply chain, and 100 times bigger when you look at customers. And actually for Tesco, this is a challenge we relish. We like dealing with customers. Our expertise is in listening to customers and working with them. And we see that and we say, well, even if we can only affect that consumer segment a small amount, it's still more than we can ever do within our own business. Which is not to say that we're not doing things within our own business, and we have a three-part strategy: direct, suppliers, and revolution in green consumption, perhaps slightly grandly we call it. Reducing our direct carbon footprint, we have challenges against that for 2012 and 2020, and we've recently come out and said we'll be a zero-carbon business without purchasing offsets by 2050. So it's a huge challenge for a business the size of Tesco. There's a little while to do it, but there's some targets between here and there. With suppliers, over the next 10 years, we'll work with our big suppliers to reduce emissions by 30%. And we'll help customers to halve their carbon footprint by 2020. And again, much of what we've been talking about today with consumers becoming more educated about energy use fits into that. So, reducing our direct carbon footprint. What are we doing here? Well, if you look at a country like the UK, where Tesco is, we actually have a huge legacy estate. We have lots of buildings out there, and we're also building lots of new stores. It's a little bit different in countries like China, where we have a few buildings at the moment, a few stores, and we're expanding very fast. So on both of those, we're halving emissions by 2020. So new stores that are built will have half the emissions on average by 2020, and existing buildings, we're going to halve what's there in the existing estate. And distribution as well, by 2012, we'll halve the distribution emissions of each case of goods delivered by then. And we're actually making real progress on this just here in Cambridgeshire. If you go to Ramsey, just up the road, we built our first zero-carbon store. We think it's the first zero-carbon supermarket in the world. It's a fantastic store to go and visit, and the encouraging thing for me when I went to see it, as a marketeer by background, is it's actually a great store to shop in. There are things there that customers can see that make it not only a greener store, a more energy efficient store, but a more pleasant store as well. All the fridges have doors on. That actually makes it a slightly warmer store to walk around and a much quieter store to be in. There's not lots more natural light. So lots of obvious stuff like that. And of course, there's a combined heat and power plant out the back, running off renewable fuel sources, which means that net over the course of a year, it doesn't use any energy. So tackling our direct footprint and reducing emissions in our supply chain. Probably a little bit small for you to have a look at there, but hopefully you can see it later in more detail. We've done lots of analysis on the different areas of our business and what we sell. And actually the challenge is in different places. I don't have to tell people in this room that something like a light bulb, 96% of the energy that it uses in its life is in the consumer's home, stuck in the room. But if you look across the breadth of what we sell, something like milk, which almost every customer walking into our shops every day will buy, 73% of the carbon footprint of that product is in the field or in the cow, or in the cow's stomach specifically in this case. So there's areas we can work in these different areas. Incidentally, on the milk, we have this fantastic trial. I wish I had a slide to show you, but I don't, where we're measuring live the emissions from a cow's stomach. We have little microphones that measure how much they burp each day, so you can feed the cows different feedstocks and see exactly what happens. I hear from the researchers in Manchester, it's very exciting to listen live. And then the bit that I work on, which is leading a revolution in green consumption. And we start from the point of view that actually customers want to be green. There's some reported increase in scepticism, and certainly the sort of ClimateGate scandal of recent months has had a bit of a blip in what customers are thinking. But actually you have to look at the long term, and we asked customers the question to agree or disagree. I am concerned about what I personally can do to help protect the environment. And back in 1980, 30% of people agreed. In 1999, 40%, and now it's around 70%. So forget about the last couple of months and minor blips, and people making perhaps political capital out of that. You know, the overwhelming trend is that people are concerned about this. And actually, by the time it got to sort of mid-2007, the environment was the biggest thing that the British public were worried about and concerned about, ahead even of the economy. The economy has sort of ticked up slightly since then, but I think the overwhelming long-term emphasis will be the same. What do customers want? They want help to choose a greener lifestyle, and they expect us to take action as a business. So it would be wrong for Tesco to try and tell its customers what they could do without doing something ourselves, and that's where the zero carbon target comes in. But there are barriers, and again you'll see links here with what we've heard all day, and certainly this afternoon. Price is the biggest barrier for customers, when they talk about going green or saving energy. A lack of information, a sense of disempowerment, the idea that it's often replayed from customers that is there any point in me doing this action? You know, we've heard a lot about dishwashers or washing machines today. Does it really make a difference when they're building coal-fired power stations in China? Is the one that is often played back. Social barriers, making green mainstream. This has changed a lot over recent years, but there's still a sense amongst a good chunk of our customers that this is something that's a bit odd to do, isn't it? And finally, practical barriers. Once everything else is overcome, it has to be easy and it has to be straightforward. So this is some research we did with the University of Manchester. We started something called the Sustainable Consumption Institute there. But what we're trying to do, and what my role is within the business, is trying to overcome each one of these. I think this is really applicable to everyone in the room, whether you're working on climate change or more specific aspects of smart meters. Consumers are going to be at the end of whatever work happens, whatever space you are in the supply chain. Think about your consumers, think about how we can overcome the barriers. So I've got an example from each one of these about what Tesco has done. And price first, and energy-saving light bulbs. And the chart you can see there are the sales when we sell these bulbs at different prices. The green option does most often feel like an expensive option to customers. And actually we say that most of the time it shouldn't do. And I think the FMCG companies, and perhaps even retailers like Tesco ourselves, have kind of failed a bit over this over the last 10 or 20 years. We have created green brands, we've made them premium brands. What we're saying now is that actually if you're taking energy out of the production of a product, then that's less of a cost to the retailer, less of a cost to the supplier. There should be less of a cost to the consumer. Energy-saving bulbs, we did a promotion where we sold 5 for 40p, and we sold as many bulbs in a fortnight that we did in the whole of 2006, the year before. And that's a huge difference. I think what's important here is actually that it's not just price, but it's about price perception as well. And I love that stat from the last presentation where even apologies if I don't get this exactly right, but even the most engaged customers, 70% of them only would spend £24 a year to save £150 a year. So this idea that you can spend a little bit now to save a lot, even the most engaged customers don't get it. With energy saving bulbs, we've been out there for a long time saying if you buy one of these bulbs, it'll save you £5 a year. We didn't even talk about carbon or the planet, because people who are engaged know that, the rest don't. Even then, nothing really happened. As soon as it's 8 pence each, people bought them whether or not they had light bulb needs or not. So the price is there. And information, carbon footprint labels. So information is really important to customers. They want to know more about this. The language of carbon is starting to become more familiar. We know that around 50% of customers now can correctly define what a carbon footprint is, unprompted if you ask them. And we introduced the carbon label a couple of years ago. We've now labelled 120 products, which in Tesco in the UK is getting towards £1 billion worth of sales a year, because it's products like milk and bread and potatoes and orange juice that are in most customers' baskets most of the time. If I click on to a sort of vast label, they're never quite this big on the package, but you can see them on those products. Do go and have a look when you're in Tesco. I think this fits with some of what we've heard this afternoon as well. The number there, 750 grams of CO2 per wash, means nothing to most people. It's a number, for the very, very engaged people, they'll say, well, UK consumer, is it 10 or 14 tonnes a year? And they'll have a bit of a debate about imports or not, and they'll try and divide it by 750 grams, and they might get there. But those other 3 bits of information are important for everyone. The top one is just saying, you as a consumer don't have to do anything. By putting this label on, by working with the Carbon Trust, we have committed to reduce this. And we will reduce that over time, and we will relabel every 2 years to show people the reduction. But the real difference is the comparison. This is a big box powder of Tesco label, and we say if you buy the gel, or I think the concentrated liquid in this case, it's 650 grams per wash. It's less, it's a smaller number, it's no more expensive. It takes up less space in your trolley, it's less heavy to carry home, less space in the cupboard. It's just a better option all round, and it saves carbon as well. And then the difference, washing at 30 rather than washing at 40 saves 170 grams of CO2 per wash. So I think this fits with the information. It's interesting for me to hear some of what you're talking about this afternoon. I like the idea of sort of analogue displays. It's really tricky to get this across on a product. People make purchasing decisions in a very short period of time. But what we're hoping to do as we get it on more and more products is to get to a point where many consumers at the moment will be able to look at a product and say, well, that's how many calories it is. I know that's a lot, or I know that's a little. People can look at a Cadbury's cream egg and say that it's probably not as healthy as a Satsuma. But getting to the point where this language of carbon and the carbon embodied in the product, not just in a light bulb when it's plugged in your house, but in something that's created, transported, produced and disposed of, is there. Overcoming a sense of disempowerment, and actually the example we've got here is carrier bags. This is the percentage reduction on that chart over time from 2006 to 2009 in carrier bags. We went out in 2006 and said, we're not going to penalise customers for using carrier bags, but we will offer them an incentive. And if you reuse a bag, a competitor bag, a Duke shopping bag, or an old Tesco bag in Tesco, you get 1 club card point back. Not a huge amount to us. It's probably about the same cost as us giving them a bag. But since we started doing that, we've saved a huge number of bags, and since 2006, we've saved 5.2 billion carrier bags. Each carrier bag has a very small amount of CO2. Don't be fooled and think this is the big issue. But actually 5.2 billion, even a very small amount, makes a big difference. The other example I put up there is I think that's one of our Kidston carrier bags, where by making it something that is attractive and appealing, people will buy that as a status symbol, or just as a fashionable item. Making green mainstream, and we've talked a bit about this already today. I think this is somewhere where our research shows that things are changing. And one of the things that customers will say to us, if they're really honest with us, if we do really in-depth market research, they'll say, what I don't like is the fact that most of these things I do to go green or save energy, no one ever sees. And no one ever sees me running my laundry at 30 rather than 40. No one ever sees me putting the energy-saving light bulbs in, because they're so good now, they're just like normal ones. And actually, amongst a certain group of people, something like the price makes a difference because you can see it, it's very visible. And actually, solar panels are moving in that direction. It's seen as a little bit of a status symbol. It's a bit about, I know what's going on here and I'm getting involved in it. And that's starting to happen. But it also happens because it's got a Tesco badge on it. And there's something about the big brands that have relationships with consumers that say, it's okay, I got it from Tesco, it's safe, it'll work, it's practical. I trust that organisation to come into my house, to go up into my loft, to drill holes in my house and do all the sort of things that they do. And certainly we launched this home efficiency renewable energy service since the feed-in tariffs were announced, and that's what's made it attractive and appealing to consumers. We can't fool ourselves, though. Actually, compared to the home insulation, which we've been offering for a couple of years, this is a fraction. And actually, it's the home insulation that customers should be doing first. And finally, practical barrier, electric vehicle charging. Tesco doesn't sell cars, so you could start by thinking, why should Tesco get involved in this? But an awful lot of people do drive to our shops. And as electric vehicles take off, more and more people will want to be able to charge those whenever they are, wherever they are. So we are trialling electric charging points in a number of our stores. We're getting involved in Transport for London's Plugged In Places initiative. And we're trialling the technology and working out what works for customers. So that's an area where there's a perceived barrier here from customers. There's a practical barrier. I can buy this car, but will I be able to drive it somewhere and charge it when I get there? And we're offering that in our stores. So, final slide for me, just to sum up where we got to. 3 big challenges for Tesco and 3 sort of pillars to our climate change strategy. A zero carbon business by 2050. Resource efficient supply chain and a revolution in green consumption. And all of it underpinned by understanding where our customers are at the moment and actually what the barriers are for our customers to action as well. So, thank you very much.